TradeSquare is Australia's first business-to-business marketplace connecting people, brands and organisations into this diverse ecosystem in a unique global landscape. Through pivoting, transforming and reshaping, Australian businesses have an opportunity to create the model for the future that aligns with the world's needs and leveraging the power of a collaborative approach. Through the TradeSquare podcast, we will bring together dynamic, diverse and thought-provoking leaders from business, government and organisations to have conversations to further enable new thinking for the future. Welcome to TradeSquare. I'm Catherine Vandermeulen and our guest today is Amy Crookes, Asia Pacific Environmental Social Governance Services Leader at EY. How are you, Amy?
Good, thank you.
Now listen, who is Amy Crookes?
Well, two parts to me. I am living in Melbourne. I live with my husband and my two children. So Sadie is 8 and Jack is 5. So they're a big part of who I am, and then a big advocate as well and a big supporter of the role that I play at EY, which I've been in for a few years now. So at EY, I play the role of Asia Pac Environmental Social Governance Services, and that sits within our procurement team. And at EY, we're a global procurement function, which is probably the most exciting part because I have a global team which is based in US and Canada and UK that I work in closely with. And while the title is quite long, it's basically our team is in two parts of one is supply diversity and the other is our sustainable procurement commitment here at EY. And my focus within Asia Pac and specifically Australia and New Zealand at the moment is in creating opportunities within our supply chain and also working with our clients on opportunities for Indigenous businesses here in Australia, as well as Māori and Pacifica in New Zealand, which I'm really excited about.
So can you tell me a bit more about the phrase or words global procurement, what that actually means?
Yeah, we have a team of I think around 450 people across the globe. So procurement professionals and people in different roles in within that team, looking at opportunities for internal what keeps EY going. So whether it's real estate or technology, I come from a background of procurement that focused on talent. So that's anything that we need for our learning development as well as our internal functions, workplace services. So it's quite broad. We have a really big team across the globe that looks after everything that you need to run the business, and then also what our clients need as well. So a lot of our software that our clients need for us to, perform different functions for them, as well as our go-to-market strategy on how we can include diverse suppliers in that.
And so out of all of that and your role, obviously encompassing lots of different things, what's that one thing that you are super passionate about in your role?
Oh, absolutely. Just what I do. Indigenous procurement is what I probably live and breathe. And I'm sure my husband and my family, my friends have all been really so kind to listen as I've really explored this area over the last 3 or so years. And it's become something that in no aspect of my career before have I ever wanted to research and keep learning and watch and keep seeking more people to collaborate with to understand how we can have a bigger impact. And I think that's where my heart really sits, and I'm finding so much job fulfillment because you can see the impact. And as I work in with different Indigenous entrepreneurs, it's the passion of debunking any of the myths and biases that we have within Australia on how Indigenous entrepreneurs and Indigenous businesses can deliver for corporates or create an impact themselves.
And so thinking about businesses and suppliers in 2020 and obviously moving now into 2021, how did you really see organisations, particularly last year, because obviously it was a challenging year, creating more value in the world to then thrive in 2021?
Oh, look, and that was it was 2020 was a big year. If you think about the impact of COVID on our economy, what it's done for small business, the impact on those, what it's done for our different communities. Women owned entrepreneurs have really struggled, and women in general have been really disadvantaged by COVID. And then if you lead into June, where we had a lot of social unrest as a result of Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd, all of this kind of speaks to what we're doing within corporate, and we've seen it, of course, a huge focus from government. But businesses have really, and especially Indigenous businesses, I've been where I play the biggest role, have really pivoted, to use that big word of 2020. We've seen some really amazing suppliers just turn around, go digital, and that's probably been the biggest thing, is the access to digital capability. But then choosing to see how else they can do business, how else they can continue to look after their suppliers. And I think the biggest stretch I've seen from some of the suppliers that are coming through is starting to understand and asking amazing questions of, well, how do you think you'll work differently? And of course, we're going to. EY will completely work differently now that we can see how to work remotely. So what are our different business needs? And so I think our suppliers are preempting that. They're understanding to keep going in what they're doing and be resilient in that. We're starting to see a lot more value from our suppliers in what they're presenting to us. You know, of course, we're going to have suppliers that have dropped off and probably have taken a bit of a time to hibernate. But if I think about some of the Indigenous entrepreneurs that I really admire, such as Dwayne Good from Inspired Travel or Mundanara Bales from the Black Card, they've really changed their mindset and decided, well, what other areas can we focus on, or how do I want to do business differently in 2021? You know, how do I want to continue to work? And if I think about Mundanara, she put everything from doing face-to-face cultural capability with the Black Card, and she went online, she got help, she put it all onto Zoom, and she's run those really beautifully, and I've attended one of those. But she also started a podcast herself, which came at such a great time for so many of us to have as we're in lockdown. But she's really educated me and so many people I know hugely on just different aspects of reconciliation, Indigenous entrepreneurship. And I think that was such a big shift in how she's doing business for 2021.
And as you just highlighted with a few people that you've been working with, people play such an integral role in transforming Australian businesses. Are you able to share one case study where you've seen really wonderful humans step up to the challenges that have been for the last 6 months?
I think we've seen quite a few examples of businesses that have just had to shift, like I've just spoke about with Dwayne and Mundanara. Here at EY, though, and I know we're a big corporate, but our Indigenous sector practice and myself, we did actually go out and say, well, hang on, what's most needed from Indigenous businesses at the moment? And we worked in with Supply Nation to publish a series of webcast series on Indigenous entrepreneurship, but also challenges and resilience, etc., and different topics. And through that series is where we really saw some brilliant businesses talk around what they're doing. So you've got people like Laura from Clothing the Gap, who I think in the last 12 months, her growth has been astronomical. So they're an organization who went from 10,000 to over 100,000 followers in the last 12 months. And a lot of that's been just from Instagram, I think, as well, following, and the Black Lives Matter, of course. Buying Black has been a big focus here in Australia. And Laura's been very vocal as well around the use of the Aboriginal flag as well. So I think she's someone in the last 12 months, just because of what's happened with COVID and the mindset of her and her team there. They're so resilient, they're so resourceful, and they really have taken this time to really think through the impact of their business. And so I've really loved watching their company grow.
So you mentioned something before that I wanted you to potentially answer. How do you think that you will work differently? You know, we've kind of been conditioned to work a certain way all of our working lives.
Yeah.
And now we've had to flip that on its head, and not just about kind of going from the physical to the digital, But
Mm.
holistically, how do you think the next 3 years will look for you in terms of working
Mm.
differently?
I think I've done personally a lot of thinking on this. I've been very, very fortunate. For probably the last 8 years, I've been working remotely anyway. So my roles have always been, so I was living in Singapore, so I was reporting back to Australia. And so that formed up a lot of those sort of skills. And so by the time COVID hit, I spend most of my time working from home. So that wasn't a big change to me. I just think I've always been pretty strict on making sure that I dress for the day. I feel like I'm there at work still. That part of it that hasn't changed for me at all, like it has for some. The biggest impact on me has been the impact of lockdown on my mental health, if I'm honest, as well as my physical health. And I found I really struggled with even getting out to go for a walk. And I was so focused on making sure that my kids were okay, which is what we should be doing. But I did really not. I forgot to look after myself in a lot of ways. And I think I've approached 2021 with I can't keep doing the job I'm doing at the moment. It is really a large role, which I love, but I can't put all of it into it if I'm not feeling physically, mentally strong as well. So I think I've kind of given myself a bit of permission, knowing that EY is hugely flexible and so supportive of all those angles. And if I think about what EY, especially Melbourne, has done for staff during lockdown, and what they've done around mental health and well-being as a constant, it's not just talking the talk, they mean it. Take that time out, work your day so that you're getting those elements in. I think this year, and maybe it's because my kids are a little older now, I really do want to focus on, just if I can't give myself, that thirty minutes in the morning to exercise and get my steps up, and then focus on what is stressing me out. So I'm addressing those things. I can't look after everyone else, and it's like the pennies dropped, but that's what I'll be focusing on making sure that my day sets up right, and then how can I stop being chained to the desk and start to just work more efficiently, I think, by being just better mind in my body and mind.
And it really is that holistic approach to well-being. And as you said, it's not just about EY kind of putting it out there.
No.
It's actually walking the talk and actually following through on a lot of those things. And I think we all have our own personal, I can't think of accountability
Yeah.
that we need to take on board, that it is our life and it is who we are. And if we want to show up to be the best versions of ourselves, these are the things that I need to do for myself to be that best person for myself, for my children, for my husband, for
Mm.
my job, all of those different elements and all of those different roles that we play. But without that centerpiece of us being well, it's very
Yeah.
difficult to give to all of those other elements.
No, exactly right. And I think we all know it. But I think sometimes, and I think I speak for, my friends as well, on women don't always put ourselves first. And I think, I can be definitely guilty of doing a little bit of that martyr, no, that's fine. I'll just make sure everyone's okay. But I'm not doing myself any favors. And I find that I just have to do that now, and hopefully I stick with it. But I'm still getting as much out of my day when I start fresh, and so far so good for 2021.
Well done. So, what does diversity and inclusion really play, the role of it play in the economic recovery of Australia?
Going to what we were talking before around what 2020 has done for our Australian economy, and what those impacts of COVID and the lockdown has been, I think we're seeing a larger focus on D&I, and how that links in as well for our recovery from both government and corporates as well. So there's a strong focus there. And if I think about the work that we're doing for government ourselves here at EY, we're starting to see a huge amount of tenders that come through that really specifies how we're going to contribute to the local economy, and how we're going to support disadvantaged communities, such as our Indigenous communities, women-owned businesses, disabled enterprises, etc. So there's a huge focus on that in government policy. And with diversity inclusion, we really know that by opening up that the impact of targeted procurement can have. It's a really big impact on social economic prosperity. So we know all of that. Government knows all of that. But we also know that now government needs to push on to different parts of the private sector to help build that up. And we all have a role to play in that as well. So, it was interesting. I had a phone call not long ago from someone I know who works for a very small company, and he was trying to do a tender himself that filtered into a government one, and he couldn't understand, what was this social procurement element that's been now required. And once I explained it, it all clicked, and it was probably one of the best conversations I've had. He got it straight away, and he said, well, okay, that makes sense. We all need to play a part in that. And I think that's the message that's coming through now of how do you support local? How do you make sure all parts of Australia and all parts of our community is getting that assistance to find that economic prosperity that is needed?
And as you said, with such a strong focus on Australian and Indigenous suppliers, why is that such an important factor for our future of this country?
Look, I think it all comes down to the role we play in just recognising the past injustices, as well as our ongoing inequalities experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. We think about the closing gap and how far we just haven't come on meeting any of those objectives. And I think we need to focus on our reconciliation and know what reconciliation we are actually reconciling with, and the role that we all need to play here in Australia on understanding how those disparities look, understanding our statistics of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that are incarcerated, our children in care, and then also the economic disparity as well. So we have a role to play, and that's what these government policies are in place to stimulate our Indigenous entrepreneurship and create economic development and provide opportunities for our Indigenous communities to just participate in the economy. And then that, of course, then flows on to Indigenous employment within those and then intergenerational wealth and success as well.
You said how far we haven't come, and I've been living in New Zealand for the last couple of years, and I obviously saw how integrated and how much further they are along the way in terms of it being one country, one nation, one people. And it really, truly, you can feel that in the culture, you can feel that in everything. Why is it that Australia hasn't come as far on that journey? What is the gap that we're actually missing?
I think, starting to work a little bit in New Zealand as well, I think absolutely that's something that has blown me away in New Zealand as well. But saying that, we also have the same economic disparity that is here in Australia for our Indigenous communities. So, which is why the government in New Zealand is now putting in place a similar procurement policy with a 5% target, which is really exciting. And EY is really keen to move forward on that. But here in Australia, I think this is just me talking from my personal views. I think we're a pretty racist country, and it comes down to our also, and I don't speak on behalf of everyone, but I think it's just that ignorance, and it's the lack of education that we've had. And I think the most disappointing thing is to think that I grew up in a very a large town with quite a large Aboriginal population. Yet I learnt nothing at my school. There was no integration of Indigenous education. There was no acknowledgement of country. And it's something that we're still having to push here now. And I play a big part at EY around our reconciliation. And then from a personal perspective as well, of trying to understand what my school is doing for my children. Now, my youngest son goes to school this year, and his program at early childhood has been amazing. It's just been beautiful. Every day they do an acknowledgement of country, and every day there's different books or learning that they have that's integrated. And for me, I started to get quite anxious last year when I realised that he was going to go to school where none of this is really done except at assembly. There's an acknowledgement country rattled off, and that's as far as it has gone. So I've been trying to really working closely with the school to just say, well, what are we doing, and what else, as a parent, what role can I play? And I'm really excited to think that we've finally got the Aboriginal flag up at school. Reconciliation Week and NAIDOC Week, there was a big stronger focus, and they now have a team of teachers who are really passionate as well. So I'm hoping that I'll now, post-COVID, I'll get in there and help as well. So I think it comes down to education, and with the voice to Parliament that they're just starting to discuss this year, I'm really hoping that the education that goes out around that and what that represents and how this will help Indigenous communities have that self-determination and voice to Parliament that they're asking for, that people will stop and they'll read and they'll listen rather than just assuming. And I'm hoping this rolls out from government with a really strong message of collaboration. And I know here at EY, we're already starting to think around, well, how can we support that message internally as well for our staff so that they understand what's going to be asked and form their own opinion and how they can have their own role to play in reconciliation there.
And so maybe going a little bit wider now, what are some of the key topics of discussion that are really getting that consistent airtime at the office at EY at the moment?
Our focus, if I think EY globally at the moment, there is still a big focus on our anti-racism commitment and how that looks in different countries. But then the US have kicked off with a huge campaign around our entrepreneur access network for Black and Latinx entrepreneurs. We have a huge team of employees looking at the digital divide, which is a common topic across a lot of the globe at EY around what we can be doing to assist in that. And I think it comes down to looking at our recruitment policies. It looks at supplier diversity. It looks at what we need to do around our career path, and that will then flow down to Australia as well. So that's probably a big one. The other topic which will have a large focus for 2021 is our environmental commitment as well. So our carbon commitment, as well as we have a new sustainability leader as well. So we have a huge commitment around what we're going to be playing there and how that plays out for our suppliers and what we're expecting from them when it comes to just having a bare minimum of assessment for the risk involved. And then also with that plays into modern day slavery as well. So there's a few focuses from a procurement perspective, but I think this year I expect to see a lot more around a more of an education process around our different closing the gap topics that we really want to educate our staff on. But otherwise, at the moment, it's pretty quiet, but a lot of the conversations are still buzzing around what the role we can play around our anti-racism statement.
Well, thank you, Amy, so much for sharing your knowledge, your insight, and your true passion on this topic with TradeSquare.
Thanks so much for asking me.
For more information on TradeSquare, head to www.tradesquare.com.au and support Australian business economic recovery and growth with a collaborative approach to the future of business.